23 knife wounds. That's what it took to silence the screams echoing through a $500,000 suburban home. I killed my wife. The 911 call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. 48 hours earlier, he'd carried her across the threshold as his blushing bride. Now her blood was pooling on their marble kitchen floor. A perfect marriage turned into a nightmare in less than 2 days. What could possibly transform a loving husband into a ruthless killer in just 48 hours? You are about to find out. Welcome to True Crime Journal HQ. Thanks to all our viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay with us for daily update on the most shocking true crime stories. Don't forget to subscribe. Valentina Kozlov wasn't born to be a predator. She was born to be prey. In 1995, she entered the world in Donetsk, Ukraine, as bombs fell just miles from her hospital ward. Her father, Victor, worked double shifts at a steel factory while her mother, Oksana, cleaned office buildings at night. They weren't wealthy, but they had hope, until the economy collapsed when Valentina turned 8. Growing up, she watched her parents sell everything valuable just to buy bread. Her childhood toys disappeared one by one. Her father started drinking heavily, and her mother grew distant and bitter. By 15, Valentina had learned the most important lesson of her young life. Survival meant adaptation, and adaptation meant deception. She became fluent in English by watching American movies with stolen internet. While other teenagers dreamed of romance, Valentina studied psychology books, learning how people think, what they want, and how to give it to them. She wasn't naturally manipulative. She was naturally desperate. At 19, she won a visa lottery to America. With just $200 in her pocket and a fake recommendation letter she'd forged herself, Valentina landed in New York City. For 2 years, she worked legitimate jobs, cleaning hotels, serving coffee, and yes, doing actual translation work for Ukrainian immigrants who couldn't speak English. But legitimate work paid peanuts. Her tiny apartment had cockroaches, and she ate ramen noodles for dinner every night. Meanwhile, she watched wealthy Americans throw away more money in a single dinner than she made in a month. The system wasn't fair, she decided, so she'd level the playing field. That's when she discovered online forums where seasoned romance scammers shared their techniques. They called it finessing the game, targeting lonely, wealthy men through dating apps and social media. Valentina studied their methods like she was earning a master's degree in manipulation. She learned to craft the perfect profile, beautiful but not intimidating, successful but still vulnerable, exotic but relatable. She practiced emotional mirroring, becoming whatever her targets needed her to be. A business partner would teach her about investments. A divorced dad would get sympathy about custody battles. A lonely widower would find someone who understood grief. Within 6 months, she was pulling in $3,000 a week from various marks across 3 different dating platforms. She moved to Denver, rented a nice apartment, and bought designer clothes. To neighbors and acquaintances, she was simply a freelance translator who worked with wealthy international clients. But here's what made Valentina different from other scammers. She genuinely felt guilty about it. She'd lie awake at night, staring at photos of her victims' families, knowing she was destroying lives. Part of her hoped that someday she'd meet someone real, someone who could save her from this life she'd created. Have you ever reinvented yourself for survival? Sometimes the line between adaptation and deception becomes impossible to see. But Valentina wasn't the only one hiding deadly secrets in this perfect suburban neighborhood. Scammers like Valentina don't just target millionaires, they target anyone vulnerable. Subscribing isn't just supporting this channel, it's protecting yourself by learning the red flags. If you'd rather stay blind to these dangers, explain why in the comments. Damian Blackwood was the golden boy who had everything figured out, until life taught him that success means nothing when someone you trust decides to destroy you. Born in 1992 to Michael and Linda Blackwood in Lakewood, Colorado, Damian grew up in a solid middle-class household where hard work was religion and financial security was salvation. His father ran a small plumbing business, and his mother managed accounts for a local credit union. They weren't wealthy, but they were stable, and they raised their son to believe that with enough determination, anyone could build something great. By age 12, Damian was already hustling, He mowed lawns in summer, shoveled driveways in winter, and saved every dollar in a coffee can hidden under his bed. While other kids played video games, he studied construction magazines and sketched building plans. His dream was simple: own the biggest construction company in Colorado by 30. He started Blackwood Construction at 22 with a $15,000 loan from his parents and a beat-up pickup truck, working 18-hour days, sleeping in his truck between jobs, eating gas station sandwiches. Damian was willing to sacrifice everything for success, and it paid off. Within 5 years, he was pulling in 6 figures, building custom homes for Denver's elite. That's when he met Rebecca. She was perfect on paper, a marketing executive with her own condo, a college degree, and ambitions that matched his own. They dated for 2 years, married in a $40,000 ceremony, and bought a beautiful house in Cherry Hills Village. Damian thought he'd won the lottery, but Rebecca had been living a double life. She'd racked up $80,000 in credit card debt, gambling away their savings at Black Hawk casinos, while Damian worked 70-hour weeks. When he discovered her addiction, she blamed him for being emotionally absent and demanded half of everything in the divorce. The legal battle lasted 18 brutal months. Rebecca's lawyer painted Damian as a workaholic who drove his wife to gambling through neglect. She got the house, half his business assets, and $3,000 monthly alimony for 3 years. At 28, Damian lost nearly everything he'd spent a decade building. The betrayal broke something fundamental inside him. Friends noticed the change. He became obsessive about money, checking his accounts multiple times daily. He installed security cameras in his new apartment and kept detailed financial records of every transaction. Trust became his enemy. For 3 years, he rebuilt his empire with the focus of a man possessed. No relationships, no distractions, just work and wealth accumulation. He bought a fortress-like house with state-of-the-art security systems. He diversified his investments across multiple banks and used different passwords for every account. Never again would someone destroy what he'd built. But humans aren't designed for isolation. By 31, the loneliness was eating him alive. He'd lie awake at 3 a.m., successful and miserable, wondering if he'd spend the rest of his life alone. His parents worried. His business partner, Kyle Morrison, constantly urged him to start dating again. "Not everyone is Rebecca," Kyle would say. But Damian's response was always the same. "That's what I thought about Rebecca." The psychological profile was textbook: a successful man with abandonment trauma. Desperate for connection but terrified of vulnerability. He wanted love but needed control. He craved intimacy but demanded guarantees that didn't exist. Do you know someone who's been burned by love? Have you watched them build walls so high that they became their own prison? What would you do to protect your life savings if you'd already lost everything once? Little did he know his guardian angel was actually a predator in disguise, and she'd already studied his every weakness. Damian thought he was too smart, too successful to fall for a scam. He was wrong, and it cost him everything. Don't make the same mistake. Subscribe right now so you'll recognize these traps before they destroy your life. And if you're choosing not to subscribe, I dare you. Tell us in the comments why you'd risk being the next victim. It was supposed to be just another Thursday night at Elway's Wine Bar in downtown Denver. Damian sat alone at the mahogany bar, nursing a $20 glass of Cabernet and reviewing construction blueprints on his tablet. He'd been working 14-hour days and needed to decompress somewhere that didn't feel like his empty house. That's when she walked in. Valentina had chosen this upscale venue carefully. Her research showed that successful contractors frequented places like this after long workdays. She wore a sophisticated black dress, expensive enough to suggest success, modest enough to avoid intimidation. Her hair was pulled back in a professional style, and she carried a leather portfolio that made her look like she belonged. She ordered a wine that cost exactly half of what Damian was drinking, not too cheap, not too expensive. Then came her first calculated move. "Excuse me," she said with a slight accent that made her voice sound exotic yet trustworthy. "I couldn't help but notice your blueprints. Are you an architect?" "Contractor," Damian replied, looking up from his tablet. The moment their eyes met, he felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years: genuine attraction. She was stunning, but not in an obvious way. There was something authentic about her smile. "How fascinating," she said, sliding onto the bar stool next to him. "I've always admired people who build things with their hands. There's something honest about construction work." That word, honest, hit Damian like a drug. After years of dealing with dishonest lawyers and his lying ex-wife, here was someone who appreciated integrity. For the next 2 hours, Valentina deployed every technique in her playbook. She mirrored his body language, asked thoughtful questions about his work, and shared carefully crafted stories about her own translation business. She mentioned her immigration struggles, making Damian feel protective. She complimented his watch, a Rolex he'd bought to celebrate his business recovery, without seeming materialistic. When he offered to buy her dinner, she politely declined. "I don't usually let strangers buy me meals," she said with a shy smile, "but maybe coffee sometime." The refusal was pure psychology. By not seeming interested in his money, she made him trust her more. By suggesting coffee instead of an expensive dinner, she appeared modest and genuine. By calling him a stranger, she created intimacy through playful teasing. As they exchanged numbers, Damian felt something he hadn't felt since before Rebecca destroyed his world: hope. This woman seemed different. She asked about his dreams, not his bank account. She admired his work ethic, not his possessions. She felt real. Have you ever ignored red flags because someone seemed perfect? Sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who make us feel completely safe. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. If you're enjoying this content, drop a comment with, "I'm still here." Let's see who's still watching. But this fairy tale romance was about to become a financial nightmare that would end in blood. Over the next 6 months, Valentina Kozlov became the woman Damian Blackwood never knew he needed. And that was exactly the problem. Their second date was coffee, as promised. Their third was a modest dinner at a mid-range restaurant where she insisted on splitting the check. By date 5, she was cooking homemade Ukrainian meals in his kitchen, filling his house with warmth and laughter for the first time in years. She never asked for expensive gifts, never hinted at financial support, never displayed the gold-digging behavior that had destroyed his first marriage. But every move was calculated. Week 3. My laptop crashed, and I have a huge translation project due tomorrow. I'm so stressed. Damian immediately offered to buy her a new one. She refused 3 times before reluctantly accepting a $1,200 MacBook as a loan she promised to repay. Month 2. The immigration lawyer needs another $3,000 for my citizenship paperwork. I've been saving for months, but I'm still $800 short. Again, she seemed embarrassed to even mention it. Damian handed over the money without hesitation. Month 3. My grandmother back in Ukraine needs surgery. I know this is crazy, but could you help me send $2,000? I'll pay you back as soon as my big client pays me next month. The tears in her eyes seemed genuine. How could he say no? Each request was small enough to seem reasonable, spaced far apart to avoid suspicion, and accompanied by elaborate repayment promises that never materialized. But Damian didn't care about the money. He cared about feeling needed. Valentina was a master of love bombing. She sent good morning texts every day, cooked his favorite meals, and listened to his work problems with genuine interest. She made him feel like the most important man in the world. When he had rough days, she'd massage his shoulders and tell him how proud she was of his success. When he talked about his divorce trauma, she held him while he cried and promised she'd never hurt him the way Rebecca had. Meanwhile, she was systematically isolating him from his support network. "Kyle seems jealous of our relationship," she'd say, after his business partner questioned her mysterious income sources. "Maybe he's threatened because you're happy now." When Damian's parents invited them to dinner, she'd develop sudden migraines. When his friends suggested group outings, she'd prefer quiet nights at home. Slowly, subtly, she became his entire world. Kyle Morrison, however, refused to stay quiet. "Bro, something's off about her," he told Damian during a job site meeting. "She's been between clients for 4 months, but she's wearing designer shoes. Where's her money coming from?" "You're being paranoid," Damian snapped. "She's not like Rebecca." "That's exactly what worries me," Kyle shot back. Rebecca was obviously materialistic. This girl is playing a different game entirely. But Damian was too far gone to listen. When Valentina suggested they get married after just 5 months together, he said yes immediately. The wedding planning became another financial test. $30,000 for the venue, $5,000 for her dress, $15,000 for photography and catering. Each expense seemed reasonable individually, but together they represented the largest non-business spending of Damian's adult life. Has a friend ever warned you about someone you were dating? Sometimes the people who love us most can see dangers we're blind to. The wedding would be beautiful, but the honeymoon was about to end in blood. Friends tried to warn Damian, but he brushed them off. How many times have you ignored advice that could have saved you? Subscribing today means you'll never miss the lessons these stories carry. If you think you don't need them, drop your excuse in the comments. Let's see if anyone agrees with you. The wedding was everything Damian had dreamed of, and everything Valentina had carefully orchestrated. On a crisp October morning at the Broadmoor Resort in Colorado Springs, 150 guests watched Damian Blackwood marry the love of his life. Valentina looked radiant in her $5,000 Vera Wang gown, tears of joy streaming down her face as she promised to love, honor, and cherish him forever. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Damian felt like the luckiest man alive. Their honeymoon in Cabo San Lucas was pure magic. 5 days of champagne breakfasts, couples massages, and sunset dinners on the beach. Valentina was the perfect bride, affectionate, grateful, and constantly telling him how happy he'd made her. She even insisted they take hundreds of photos together, creating what looked like genuine memories of their perfect love story. But those photos would later serve a different purpose entirely. They returned home on a Tuesday afternoon, both tanned and still glowing from their romantic getaway. While Valentina unpacked their luggage, Damian settled into his home office to catch up on business. Tax season was approaching, and his accountant needed updated financial statements for Blackwood Construction. He logged into his primary checking account first. The balance showed $847. Damian stared at the screen, certain there was a system error. This account had contained $180,000 just a week ago. He refreshed the page. Still $847. His hands started shaking as he checked his business savings account. Empty. His personal savings account. Empty. His emergency fund at a different bank. Gone. His investment portfolio, with Charles Schwab, liquidated. In total, $383,000 had vanished without a trace. The transfer history showed a series of wire transfers to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, all processed while they were in Mexico. Each transfer was authorized using his online banking credentials, passwords that only he knew except Valentina. His voice cracked as he called her name. She appeared in the doorway wearing his old college t-shirt, looking adorable and innocent. "What's wrong, baby? You look pale." "My money," he whispered, turning the laptop screen toward her. "It's gone. All of it." Her performance was Academy Award worthy. Her face went through every stage of shock, confusion, disbelief, horror, and finally tears. "Oh my God, Damian, we need to call the bank immediately. This has to be some kind of mistake." For 30 minutes, she maintained the charade. They called the bank together. They spoke to fraud specialists. They filed police reports. Valentina held his hand and assured him they'd figure it out together. She was his wife now. They'd get through this crisis as a team. But Damian's mind was racing. Those passwords, the timing, the offshore accounts that would be nearly impossible to trace. And then he remembered something that made his blood freeze. 2 months ago, he'd caught Valentina looking at his phone while he was in the shower. She claimed she was just checking the time, but his banking app had been open. She'd laughed it off, saying she accidentally touched the screen. "The passwords," he said quietly, his voice deadly calm. "How did they get my passwords, Valentina?" "I don't know, honey. Maybe your computer was hacked. Maybe—" "Stop!" The word came out like a gunshot. "Just stop!" The transformation in her face was instantaneous and terrifying. The tears dried up. The innocent confusion disappeared. Her posture straightened, and when she looked at him, her eyes were cold as winter steel. "You figured it out," she said in a voice he'd never heard before, flat, emotionless, professional. Who are you? My real name is Vera Petrov, she said, sitting down across from him like they were discussing the weather. I'm part of an international network that specializes in romance fraud. You were target number 47. The casual way she said it, like announcing the score of a basketball game, hit him harder than any scream or confession could have. 47, he repeated numbly. You were actually one of the easier marks, she continued. Divorced men with trust issues are perfect targets. You're so desperate to prove you can spot a gold digger that you fall even harder for women who don't seem interested in money. It's basic psychology. The wedding, the honeymoon, everything. All documented for credibility with future targets. Those romantic photos we took, they're already on my new dating profiles. What would you do if someone stole your life savings? How would you react to such betrayal? The man who had built an empire from nothing, who had survived one devastating betrayal and rebuilt his entire life, felt something inside his chest break forever. What happened next would shock even seasoned detectives. Imagine checking your account tomorrow and finding it empty. Betrayal doesn't knock, it sneaks in while you're blind. Subscribing right now could be the difference between spotting a predator and becoming their prey. If you honestly believe you'll never be betrayed, I challenge you. Write it in the comments. For 2 days after Valentina's confession, Damian Blackwood sat in his empty house like a man trapped in a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. The woman sleeping beside him was a complete stranger. Every kiss had been a lie. Every "I love you" had been calculated manipulation. Every tender moment had been professional performance. He'd been living with an enemy who had studied his every weakness and exploited them with surgical precision. But worse than the emotional devastation was the financial reality. His business would collapse within weeks. The house would be foreclosed. His employees would lose their jobs. 13 years of backbreaking work had been erased by someone who viewed him as nothing more than target number 47. Valentina, meanwhile, acted like nothing had changed. She cooked breakfast, made small talk about their upcoming weekend plans, and even suggested they should renew their vows in a year. The casual cruelty of her behavior was more than his shattered psyche could handle. On Thursday evening, she was preparing dinner in their kitchen, humming the same song she'd hummed on their honeymoon. The normalcy of the scene, this monster pretending to be his loving wife, finally broke him. "How many others?" he asked from the doorway. "What?" she replied, not even looking up from the cutting board. "How many other men have you destroyed?" She sighed like he was being tedious. "Does it matter? You weren't special, Damian, you were just easy." That word, easy, was the match that ignited years of suppressed rage. The knife block sat between them on the marble counter. In one fluid motion, Damian grabbed the largest blade and lunged. Valentina's survival instincts kicked in immediately. She ran for the sliding patio door, screaming for help that would never come. The house sat on 2 acres with no close neighbors, but Damian was faster, stronger, and fueled by a fury that had consumed his rational mind. What happened next was brutal and final. When the red haze cleared, Valentina Kozlov lay motionless on the kitchen floor, victim of 23 knife wounds. The marble countertops were stained with blood. The woman who had destroyed his life with calculated precision had died in pure chaos. At 11:47 p.m., Damian called 911 with steady hands and a calm voice that would haunt the dispatcher for years. 911, what's your emergency? I killed my wife. Sir, can you repeat that? I killed my wife. She stole everything from me, and I killed her. He waited for the police on his front porch, still covered in blood, staring at nothing. When they arrived, he offered no resistance. He confessed everything, the fraud, the confrontation, the murder. Do you think there's ever justification for such violence? Where does betrayal end and responsibility begin? Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. If you're enjoying this content, share it with your loved ones to protect them from the same tragedy happening to them in the future. But this wasn't just about one man's rage. It was about an international criminal network that had been operating for years. The murder of Valentina Kozlov opened a door that law enforcement had been trying to kick down for years. Within hours of Damian's arrest, FBI cybercrime specialists were combing through Valentina's laptop and phone records. What they discovered was far more extensive than a simple romance scam. It was a sophisticated international criminal enterprise with tentacles reaching across 3 continents. Valentina's real name was indeed Vera Petrov, but she was also known as Elena Morozova, Isabella Romano, and at least 12 other identities. Her operation was based in Prague, Czech Republic, where a team of 23 women worked in shifts, managing hundreds of fake dating profiles across dozens of platforms. They had stolen over $47 million from American men in the past 5 years alone. The FBI's breakthrough came from Valentina's detailed records. She was meticulous in documenting her cons, target profiles, psychological assessments, financial capabilities, and emotional vulnerabilities. Her laptop contained files on 127 active marks across the United States, with detailed plans for extracting their wealth. Within weeks, other victims began coming forward. Robert Chen, a widowed doctor from Seattle, had lost $290,000. Michael Torres, a divorced firefighter from Phoenix, had been scammed out of his entire retirement fund. David Kim, a successful restaurant owner from Atlanta, had mortgaged his business to send money to a woman who claimed to be trapped in Ukraine. Each story followed the same devastating pattern: isolation, love bombing, financial testing, and ultimate betrayal. But unlike Damian, these men hadn't turned to violence. They'd simply been destroyed financially and emotionally. During Damian's trial, court-appointed psychologist Dr. Amanda Foster testified about his mental state during the crime. Mr. Blackwood experienced what we call acute stress reaction combined with betrayal trauma, she explained to the jury. His entire sense of reality had been systematically dismantled by a professional manipulator. While this doesn't excuse his actions, it helps us understand the psychological breaking point that led to violence. The defense argued for manslaughter, claiming Damian acted in a moment of temporary insanity. The prosecution pushed for first-degree murder, pointing to the brutality of the attack and the deliberate nature of retrieving the knife. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury found him guilty of second-degree murder. Damian Blackwood was sentenced to 25 years to life in Colorado State Penitentiary. He'll be eligible for parole in 2049 when he's 56 years old. His construction business was liquidated to pay legal fees. His house was foreclosed. The life he'd spent decades building was completely erased. Meanwhile, the international investigation expanded. Authorities in Prague arrested 15 members of the romance fraud network, though the ringleaders had fled to countries without extradition treaties. The FBI estimates that thousands of American victims lost money to this specific organization, with total losses exceeding $200 million. The impact on both families was devastating. Damian's parents, Michael and Linda Blackwood, mortgaged their home to pay for his defense. They visit him monthly at the prison, still struggling to understand how their successful son became a killer. Linda Blackwood now speaks at community centers about romance scam awareness, hoping to prevent other families from experiencing their tragedy. Valentina's mother, Oksana Kozlova, learned about her daughter's death through international news reports. She flew to Denver for the trial, sitting in the courtroom gallery, watching the man who killed her daughter get sentenced. In her victim impact statement, she said, "My daughter made terrible choices, but she didn't deserve to die. Both families lost everything because of greed and violence." The case sparked new legislation requiring dating apps to implement stronger identity verification systems. It also led to increased cooperation between American and European law enforcement agencies in tracking romance fraud networks. Where are you watching from? Have romance scams affected your community? These crimes are happening everywhere, targeting people just like you. The lessons from this tragedy are clear. Trust must be earned gradually. Financial information should never be shared with romantic partners until legal marriage, and friends' warnings should never be dismissed out of pride or embarrassment. Every time someone subscribes, it makes these warnings louder and harder for predators to hide. If you scroll past without subscribing, you're choosing silence, and silence is what lets scammers win. If that's truly your choice, explain why in the comments, because the rest of us deserve to know.